Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio. Join George Smart and Frank King as they talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Show your support by visiting US Modernist's massive mid-century modern archives at usmodernist.org or by leaving a glowing review on iTunes. And now, the boys whose kindergarten report cards read, "Inappropriately attracted to concrete," George Smart and Frank King.
Oh my, concrete, yum yum.
Oh yeah.
I have to wonder, now that I'm older and have left my childish ways behind, is there a sex dungeon located in a brutalist building anywhere? That way you could get your aesthetic and your ecstasy needs met all in one visit. Support for US Modernist Radio comes from the angelic Sarah Salk of Mod Homes Realty. When the dark forces of home buying experience are upon you and winter is coming, and there's only one real estate heroine who has the expertise, experience, 3 dragons, and a track record to find your dream home in concrete and steel, Sarah Denarius Salk brings strength, grace, and divine appreciation of modernism. That is to say, she is totally into it. You can go to modhomesrealty.com or 919-601-7339.
Thank you, Frank. Today we bring to a close our long and storied delusion that Frank King was the only modernist comedian in the world. Sorry, Frank. You're now number 2, like Avis, but I know you'll try harder. And I'm thrilled that we have the biggest celebrity yet in the history of US Modernist Radio, Australian comedian Tim Rosso-Ross. Tim has been performing since 1996. Solo and with partner Merrick Watts, he's starred in countless Australian radio and TV series. He's an author with comedy books based on the TV series and a new book we'll talk about. He's a writer for Men's Style Australia, Rolling Stone, and Sydney Magazine. He's interviewed and talked with celebrities like Will Ferrell, John C. O'Reilly, and Hugh Jackman through shows such as Merrick and Rosso Unplanned, The B-Team, Uncharted, Facing the Hangover, and Australia Versus. He's a speaker, giving talks on modernism at the Museum of Sydney, Government House, and Sydney Design Week. And, my favorite part, he's been part of an 80s hair band called Black Rose, where he totally rocks it in Lycra. In 2013, Tim started a unique stand-up show called Man About the House, set in real modernist houses, with sellout seasons in Melbourne, Sydney, and New Zealand. The best part is, he got up at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning to talk with us, for which we are profoundly grateful. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Oh, good to be with you. Thanks for bringing up my past as a lycra-wearing rock and roller.
It's in the past?
Yeah, well, my wife won't let me put the lycra on anymore. I did a gig about 7 or 8 years ago, and I got a makeup artist. I was wearing a unitard, I suppose they call it, and so I looked a bit like Gene Simmons or Paul Stanley and Kiss, where it sort of comes right down the front. I don't have a hairy chest, so I had a makeup artist actually apply hair to my chest, fake hair, and then draw the abs on with makeup. Make it look like I was a little more cut than I really am.
Nice.
Well, Tim, you started collecting modernist furniture from an early age, I understand. Is that how you came to love the houses?
Yeah, I've always rich. I suppose there's a rich history of Australian modernist furniture designers, and so I started collecting all the sort of the great names. The best known one is a guy called Grant Featherston, and the chairs are super expensive these days, as all the chairs are. And I started collecting those, and then I needed a place to put all my furniture, and so I bought a flat roof modernist house designed by a guy called Bill Baker, and then it just sort of started to spiral out of control, and I became one of those people who, drive around taking photos of houses and going to open days and getting involved in all sorts of shenanigans. And then about 5-6 years ago, I started this Man About the House show, which was when I just put my passion into overdrive. And since then, we've performed all over the place in some of the best modernist houses in Australia and also in the UK. So I've been out to Palm Springs a couple of times with it as well for Modernism Week. So, I turned a hobby into a job, which has been great.
Tell us about your house and its architect.
Yeah, it was an interesting story because post-war, we had this situation where a whole bunch of Australian architects all became pilots during the war. And Bill Baker, the architect of my house, he had an architectural firm and he worked for Qantas at the same time after the war. And, of course, we all know that John Travolta was the first guy to multitask and work for Qantas and someone else. But what happened, he used to go from Sydney to Honolulu and particularly Los Angeles. And so he's seeing all this West Coast modernism and he's getting pretty jazzed on that. And in the late 1950s, he came back and he bought a house. He built the house in that style through his friends, the Athertons. And so it's in pretty much original condition with it's a classic post and beam flat roof house. And when I found it, no one wanted it and got it cheap, which is always good. And now it's been in a bunch of magazines and the people who grew up in it can't believe that the house was famous. Was your wife, Michelle, into modern along with you, or did you have to persuade her to like that style? No, I was lucky. See, I had the house first. Ah. It was like a bachelor pad for me. And then she moved in. And then over the years, the cushions came too. And the dust ruffle? It's the soft furnishings arrived, It's like suddenly, now I'm not allowed to put anything in the house. But any of the big purchases were made more recently, we've both agreed on in terms of, pieces of furniture. But I haven't changed too much over the years. I'm sort of, as a collector of furniture, I quite like the idea that you make a decision and you pick and stick and you say, well, this is it. I'm going to have that forever. And I've got a couple of small kids and they've made a mess of some very expensive chairs, but that sort of goes with the territory, I suppose. I've got a great womb chair that's covered in breast milk. Doesn't everyone? That's the big look next season. It's really interesting because you understand that. So if someone had a womb chair in the 1950s in Sydney, there's probably 10 of them, maybe 15. They're extremely expensive to import. And so when it was the one that I've got was recovered in the 1960s, there's also no one who can recover them well. And so the way mine's recovered is pretty ropey. It's not that great, but I sort of like that as the sort of it's part of the history of the chair that, someone really didn't know how to recover it in the 1960s, but the fabric's sort of interesting. And now, of course, it's covered in human milk. So it's a chair and a snack. Well, I've seen womb chairs recovered in truck bed liner. That spray stuff that you just spray onto a truck bed. They sprayed it onto a chair, and it dried, and it was recovered. That's saying something. Well, how dreamy. I'm on eBay now looking for one. That's right. Look up truck bed liner spray foam. Little tip to all you furniture people out there. So, Tim, you've had this incredible career in comedy and television, hosting shows, doing some sketch comedy. I saw one sketch you have online where you and your partner pretend to be appliances. Can you tell us about that one? The Almost Transformers? Almost Transformers, yeah. One of our bigger hits. Essentially, we dress up as toasters and washing machines and then turn into robots and scare people. It's very big on YouTube. Yeah, I was like, I've almost had two careers. It's really interesting. It's like doing all those funny sketches where I wore a lot of wigs, and then the big thing for me was a couple of years ago I was able to get a television series up, a documentary series called Streets of Your Town, which tells the story of how Australia had some of the best domestic architecture in the world and ended up with some of the worst. And and to go from being able to do silly things where you dress up as a transformer, or there's this great, I don't know about how you do it. The one I really tell people to look at is every time I used to come to America, I used to love the soft rock ads featuring Air Supply. Oh, yeah. And you'd see on the Time Life ads, yeah. So we've done a parody of that, which I won't say what it's that we've actually called it. But that's my all-time favourite of sketches from the old days, where I got one of my dreams was always to dress up as one of the guys from Air Supply. But to do a series about how we had the best architecture in the world and then we had the worst, how we went from modernism to McMansionism was really fantastic. And it's a really great story. And it's a story that's very similar to America and why we turned our backs on modernism and what happened to us as a people and why we want to build these big houses that we want to peacock, we want to show off. We've forgotten how to be modest when it comes to design. And so those sorts of things now, it's like I've got a second act in the career and I'm still silly. I still like doing lots of comedy, and the series is not exactly serious, but it's nice to be able to blend the two, that's for sure.
Now, you sent me a couple of clips on Australian modernism. Are those available, or have they been broadcast?
The Streets of Your Town, I think it's available online at all sorts of places, and it hasn't, because it's such an Australian show, it's very difficult for them to be sold in America. It's screened in the UK, it's screened throughout Europe, but I don't know, for whatever reason, it hasn't been picked up by anyone in the US. But, you know, it's not hard to find these things on Vimeo or YouTube. There's a million different pirated copies of it, and then I happily encourage people to go and have a look at. No skin off my nose. I'd rather people see it. Oh, I just said that, but whatever. I'm so proud of this series.
We'll
you
cut
can
that
email
out later.
If you email me, I'll send you a link. I'm not that hard to find.
No, you're pretty easy to find.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know what the scene's like. Everyone knows everyone, you know. Like, I know the guys at Palm Springs from Modernism Week. I'm going out a couple of times, and certainly in Australia, everyone knows everyone. And I met a bunch of people through Instagram, which has been terrific. And so you'd meet people all over the world, which has been the great thing, I think, about sort of the Facebook groups and the Instagram friendships that you make. You can sort of catch up with people and find out about other people's homes. And certainly that's how, when we've toured to the UK, it's been one of those things where people have gone, a friend of mine told me about your show, can you come and turn up in my house and we'll put on a show? And I said, yeah, of course we'll do that. And so that's given me a chance to get in some of the best places going around, that's for sure.
Yeah, we've had Penelope Seidler and Polly Seidler and Daryl Delora and Annalisa Capuro on the show in the past. And we've got a fellow from Brisbane coming on in a couple of weeks.
I bet it's Chris.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You do know everybody, don't you?
We all know each other here.
So you've been to Palm Springs a couple of times. Have you done Man About the House out there?
Yeah, we've done a couple of times. The first time we did it at the Gand House, which was terrific. Joan and Gary Gand had us there. And I'm just trying to remember, Hal Levitt redid their version of a Kreisel House, I think it is. That was a great experience. And then we did Hotel Lautner in 2015 or 16 or whatever it was, and did a bunch of shows there. And certainly for me to do a John Lautner property was fantastic, and great bunch of folks there. And then hopefully, I'm just talking to them about now, looks like we'll take Streets of Your Town to Palm Springs next year for a screening, and I might do a couple of other talks or do some bits and pieces, and I'm always up for anything really. But yeah, anytime I can get on a plane and go to somewhere and bore people about architecture, I'm there in a heartbeat.
Oh, tell me about it. I know that story. So we're going to be bringing about 30 people out to Palm Springs for Modernism Week in 2018. Maybe we'll see you there.
Oh, absolutely.
You'll have to come over to one of our parties. We'll hang out.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's my thing. I don't want to be doing too much because there's too much to see, too much to do. And it's the worst time to try and get in people's houses, actually, to do a show, because everyone's so busy. The last thing they want to do is be hosting you in their house because they've got their own things going on. But we did the fall preview, actually, one year, and that's when we did the Gans house, and that was fantastic because it's not as crazy, and it's get really good access to things and stuff. But I mean, I still think going to the Frey House for me is one of my all-time highlights, and managed to talk myself into the El Rod House the year before, where I just went as a punter, when I just turned up just to have a look at Palm Springs for one week. And that was a fantastic experience.
So the Man About the House show, what is that like for the audience? Tell us what you do in that.
No, well, depending on whether you like it, it's the best thing in the world or it's terrible. Well, finding a mixture is, as a comedian, I don't do a lot of jokes about architecture. I do stories about where we've been to and places we've been to. And I don't have a great bunch of jokes about the great architects. We do some songs. We do a modernism song that's funny, where we name check a bunch of people. But essentially, the idea of it for me was to transform the process of visiting a mid-century home. And most of my work has been about advocacy over the last 5-6 years in terms of preservation. And so it's been a great way of introducing people, mainstream people who haven't really got modernism, to come into a house and experience it in a different way. And so you come in, you can have a drink, we'll set up the show for as many people as we can fit in. And over the course of an hour and a half watching the show, you get to look around the house, experience the house. You hear a little bit about modernism, but it's not a heavy lecture. And so it's an experience, and it's been really well received. And I mean, you mentioned Penelope Seidler before, and we did the first show in the house that Harry designed in the late 1940s in Sydney, and that's one of the great museums, modernist museums of the world.
That's a great house.
And to come and experience that in a different way, and to sit in the lounge room of the most perfectly restored home, and watch a comedy show and to perform in it, it's a real treat. So that's the preservation message has been pretty much top of mind for me, and we've had some real successes here when it comes to preservation, and a lot of that was, without blowing my own trumpet, the series I've been mentioning, Streets of Your Town, had an extraordinary impact because it was the most watched arts program or documentary series on Australian TV last year. And so it changed it's all about the councils and having heritage plans. And we're finding constantly that it's really made people sit up and take notice of 20th century heritage. And so as a result, they've changed all their planning laws, and we've seen heritage studies come into be that haven't been there before. So, we start with one really small show, and then it turns into something bigger. And so that's been terrific. We still have our losses, but on the whole, we're in a much better position than we were 3 or 4 years ago.
Now, I know you have one building in particular that they've been trying to save, and I'm not sure what the status is. Maybe you can tell us. The Sirius building in Sydney?
The Sirius building, yeah. It's a really, really late brutalist building, public housing, right in Sydney Harbour, overlooking the harbour. And the government wanted to knock it down. They all thought it was ugly. And through a series of sort of really well orchestrated and well planned, not only protests but campaigns and some legal action, we've been able to, we took the government to court and won, and overturned their decision not to heritage list it. So it's in a state of limbo at the moment, but our feeling is we'll have a change of government and the building will survive. And that's been an extraordinary process, and my part of it was about publicising the building. We essentially just did a marketing campaign and tried to let everyone know why it was important and part of the city landscape. And we did a pretty good campaign on that. And I got this guy called Peter Chadwick out of the UK who I met through Instagram, and he did this book called This Brutal House. Now, brutalism's so big in London, so big in the UK, they love it. And he's also a really good graphic designer, and he did some of the great records of the last 20 years in terms of, well-known records, whether it's a Primal Scream record or the Groove Armada record. So if you've got a favourite album of the last 20 years, he probably did the album cover for you. And so what I did was got him to do a bunch of posters for us, and we just posted these extraordinary designs. We posted the city with it, and then we managed to pull in every favour we possibly could in terms of getting media coverage for the building, and we changed people's perception on the building. And so as it stands at the moment, it looks like it's going to survive, which is great news.
A lot of the great television shows in the U.S. came from other places, England and Australia. I think America's Got Talent was actually originally Britain's Got Talent. So have you ever thought about licensing a comedian who doesn't have enough work, to do a version of Man About House in the U.S.? Hint, 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 hint.
You can go for it, mate. I'll license it out. Go for it. The hardest thing is so many of my jokes are sort of Australian. It's been really good to be able to try and make certain things. I mean, that thing for us as Australians, the jokes are universal. It's what's different is our turn of phrase, and that's it's always tricky. But I was married to a girl from Northern California for a period of time, and people often ask me how long you're married for, and I go, how long's a piece of string that you hate? And so when we broke up, I got the personality and she got the dog. But it's really half of it's doing comedy and half of it's just being interesting half the time. And to be honest, the more I do, the more people want less jokes. They want more information.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing about it. So they want funny stories rather than, I will always do. And some Friday, Saturday nights, I'll tell heaps of jokes because people are out and it's a more mainstream audience. But when you've got a room full of people who are architecture nerds, and I'll change the show based on what their interests are. So, or you can you dumb it down, or you make it a little nerdier. And sometimes I'll do shows that are really, really just full-on architecture chat. And you've got to remember, I'm not an expert, but I'm so passionate about it. I'll talk about, Australian modernism until the cows come home.
Well, and on that note, what mid-century architects and designers inspire you?
Gosh, they all do. I mean, there's a really interesting Australian guy called Robin Boyd, who I think what he did really well was take modernism and adapt it and made it Australian in terms of materiality and colours. And so what we did, I suppose the most interesting story about Australian modernism is what we call project homes, you guys call it tract homes, is that unlike anywhere else in the world, our best architects in the 1960s and 70s, all our best architects, the most famous names in Australian architecture, all designed project homes or tract homes for everyday Australians. So we made great design more accessible than anywhere else in the world. And so those guys like Robin Boyd or Harry Seidler, Neil Clerihan, all these sort of Australian guys designed these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful modernist homes that you could buy off the plan, that you could buy cheaply, or not. Well, they weren't super cheap. But so we all in the late 1960s and early 1970s, we had some of the best domestic architecture in the world. So that rationale I find really appealing. In my personal taste, a lot of I suppose I like sort of, early European modernism for its purity. So, you look at Corb's early stuff and that looks like a dormitory and you go, God, I love that. But that's an aesthetic rather than I always think about modernism in terms of the movement being really important in terms of what it can do. I'm a big believer in that idea that everyone should be able to afford and have access to great design. And I'm also really old-fashioned in that way that I think great design can solve a bunch of problems. I know how it lifts us up and it transports us somewhere. So it goes beyond just how nice is this chair, or I really like this butterfly roof house, and how cool is this 1950s car that goes with it. It does more than that. I suppose it's the power of the optimism of modernism that I find so appealing.
One of the shots you had in your video that I watched, and I'm not sure what neighborhood this was in, maybe you can tell us, but I was just amazed. You were showing McMansions, these really large houses, and what I was struck with is they were just so close to each other in this particular neighborhood. Do you remember where that was?
Yeah, it's in Perth, and it's pretty, unfortunately, it's pretty indicative of what we're doing in Australia, where we just, this urban sprawl, where we just, traditionally home ownership in Australia has been so big, and part of our national psyche is to have this idea of the quarter-acre block where you can have room out the back to play cricket and footy and, have barbecues and entertain. And instead of having backyards or, yards anymore, we build the biggest possible house we can, and we fill it up right to the edge. So everyone's living, especially it's ludicrous in a country like Australia where we've got such great weather. We don't have great extremes in weather in Australia. Remember that. It's winter now in Sydney where I am, and I'm wearing a pair of shorts. And it's, I don't know, I'm never good at the Fahrenheit, the Celsius thing, but, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's the tail end of winter, and I can wear a pair of shorts. So the idea that we have to live inside is ludicrous, and it's really sad, and it's part of this idea that we're if you think about the psychology of it, this is what's really important when you think about what a McMansion represents. It's just, the psychology of it is that we don't feel safe anymore, that we're sort of blocking out the rest of the world. We're on our devices and phones 24/7. We're always asked for things. When we go on holidays, our bosses still expect us to be able to reply to email. So there is no disconnect from the world. And so what we do is we build these. The McMansion essentially does two things. It shows off. It shows that we're rich, that we're successful. And the other thing that it does is it blocks out the world. It's about creating your own fortress to protect your family. And, you know, the last time I checked, the zombie apocalypse is probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Really?
And if it does, I don't think a McMansion's going to stop it.
No,
Really.
No.
You'd have to move on to moats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they swim. I've seen it. They can swim.
That's true. Zombies can swim, can't they?
They can swim.
They
I've
ooze a
watched
little
all
bit
the
when they
shows.
swim.
The border wall. There we go.
Yeah.
A little border
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah. And we'll get the New Zealanders to pay for it. That's it.
That's it.
So in the U.S., modernism really fell out of favor by the 1970s or so and picked back up with new interest, and particularly in furniture and new houses about 1995. Does that jibe with what happened in Australia?
Yeah, it just pretty much mirrored it in terms of the same thing happened. Like, you know, when they talk about the Dwell revival or whatever way you want to look at it when it comes to magazines and all that sort of stuff, it's like exactly the same thing happened. And then, you know, a bunch of people started putting the furniture very much in all the magazines, and Australian furniture that people were throwing out and was in garage sales suddenly was going to auction, and things that were $10 became worth thousands. And then it just suddenly became a deeper interest in the properties, and we started to see an increase in the value of Australian modernist homes, and now to the point where people really, when they didn't want to buy them years ago, now they're really into them. So it was probably a little bit later, but yeah, it was pretty much mirrored at the same time, and it fell out of favour for the same reason. It was more than fashion, I think, for modernism falling out of favour in Australia. Lots of it happened. We had this bizarre thing that happened in the 1980s where we returned to our colonial past. It was part of our 200 years of being in our bicentenary, and we suddenly started looking backwards again. And, you know, when I was at high school, you know, it was all that bad colonial furniture and peach and apricot coloured things. And, you know, we hit the 80s in a very bizarre way.
Did you go back to shag carpet and orange and things like that?
No, I don't think. Look, I suppose if you think about our modernist style here, in terms of the revival, it shows there's a lot more restraint in it than in America. So it tends to be a little bit more classic. Our modernist revival is probably much more European focused, because that's where most of our furniture came from. So we had all these people come from Europe after the war, and they made all our great furniture, and they designed all our great houses. So we're less atomic in our style here.
It seems like you are at least as excited about the furniture as you are about the houses that the furniture goes in.
Yeah, I don't collect anymore because I don't have any more room, and I want to stay married, and so I used to come home with everything. But as I've got older, I've been more interested in, I suppose, visiting places than having to own everything. And the other thing is I did a morning radio show in Sydney for 9 years, and I was making a lot more money in those days, and so I was spending a lot more money. But now I'm more art-based. I don't really feel the need to have all those things. But, I mean, I still love digging around a furniture store, and I love the history of particularly of Australian modernist furniture, and people always email me and ring me and want to know what things are. So my dad was an antique dealer, so I certainly got that from him. And I'll happily, you know, people send me a photo and go, what year's this chair? And I'll go, I don't know. I'll find out for you and spend half a day when I should be writing a new book trying to find out what someone complete stranger's chair is.
Well, tell us about your new book, Tim, The Rumpus Room.
It's a collection of stories which are based on my experience of making Streets of Your Town and my documentary series. And rather than write a book on architecture, I wanted to write a grittier, truer story of the Australian suburbs. So it's a selection of, it's part memoir and part fiction. And I published a book that sort of looks like it was designed in the 1970s. And I call it a coffee table book for people who don't have very good coffee tables. Because there's lots of really pretty architecture books out there, but this one's just a lot grimier, and it's a bit more real, I suppose. And we've all seen the great pictures of the great houses, but we all know that that's not exactly how people live right now. So I wanted to show the more human face. And no, it's gone really well. People really like stories that sort of reflect where they grew up.
It sounds like it's sort of the French connection of architecture books, more gritty, more real.
Yeah, and I think I don't do architectural language. It's I didn't train in it, and I can't do it. I mean, I always tell this story about when I was making Streets of Your Town. We went to Brisbane, and I was filming at this classic modernist home, and the regional style of architecture when it comes to modernism, I always find fascinating. And so in Queensland, where it's really hot, they have this classic house called a Queenslander, which is like a wooden house that they put up on stilts to help with ventilation. And so in the 1950s, they created this house, the Jacoby House. It's a modernist reinvention of that house. And so I went there, and I was hungover, and because I'd been out with some friends in Brisbane, and I'm doing this TV show, and they said to me, "Can you sit on the balcony, and can you tell us why this house is really important, some of that rich architectural language?" And I was so hungover, all I could say was, "Oh, how tops is this joint?" which is an Australian saying for how good is this place. And I thought they'd never use it, and they used it in the series. They also used it in the promo that ran over, and more for the TV series. But sometimes architecture is about how you feel, and sometimes if all you can say is how cool is this place, that's enough, because it's emotively charged you. And I always think that architecture and design, and I call them design stiffies, and stiffy is a great Australian term for an erection.
We've heard of that term here. Yes.
Good, just checking. So I get a design stiffy from a great piece of furniture, wall, or it can be something really simple. And great architecture should be able to lift you up, and it should affect you in the same way a great book or a beautiful piece of music it does, I think. And
porn, I guess too. Yeah, there's that.
Yes, it can. And there is which is the same reason that we use that term came into common usage, this idea of architecture porn or house porn, because it does arouse us in a certain way.
Tim, how did you come to meet Al Gore? I understand you're one of the few people that gets to do his Inconvenient Truth Talk.
It was really interesting, actually. It was quite some time ago, and he came out, and I've been doing some work with the Australian Conservation Foundation, and then about 40 of us got trapped in a room with him for 2 days.
Wow.
And he literally talked for 8 hours, and he only stopped for 2 seconds to have it, drink. He's drinking a couple of cans of soda. But his energy was extraordinary. It was a real privilege, actually. And I was so moved by it at the end, and he was trying to get out of there, and he was ready to go or something, and they just sort of said, "Oh, we've got time for one last question." I said, "I don't have a question, but I'd just like to say, Al, you're a fucking legend, mate." And, and he smiled and he beamed, and it was a really good experience, and I was really inspired and continue to be inspired by what he does in terms of climate change.
So did you do some of the talks?
Yeah, most of my, I'm not very good at it, to be honest. So most of what I've done over the years has been in terms of hosting things, writing, and when I was working in the daily media, we were constantly talking about it. So I wish I was better at it, but I'm just no good with the slides, and it was a bit of a disappointment to myself, and I'm really upset that you brought it up, to be honest. I was better at it, and I can't do it because I can't remember the science. And they said everyone could do it, but I couldn't.
Well, he's made a sequel, Tim.
Yeah, I know. It's you know what someone said to me? I was talking to someone once, and they said, I'm talking about a 7-star environmental rating for a building that I was going to do a show in, and they said, "Oh, look, don't worry about the 7-star environmental rating because the environment's out, wellness is in." And I thought, oh wow, is that what it's come to? Things that are in. So we don't care about the environment anymore. We just care about whether or not we can eat kale.
The environment has been in for about 3 billion years, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's pretty much how it works.
Well, speaking of eating, you've done commercials for Kentucky Fried Chicken. Did you have to dress up like the Colonel like they do here?
No, I never did it. You know what they did? Kentucky Fried Chicken did a commercial in the house and ruined it.
Oh.
They dripped oil everywhere around the pool. I'm still fighting with them about it.
Oh, great! Another good memory for
they dripped chicken around your house.
Yeah, they had some commercial where they were around the pool, and they put ketchup and oil everywhere, and then they came back with a gurney and they took the coping off the pool. My pool was put in the 1960s, and it's a little fragile. The best thing about it is I've got these yellow and white umbrellas that my wife found in Los Angeles. And when we came out to do one of the shows in Palm Springs, a friend of mine, she purchased them online because she couldn't get them in Australia. And my friend who was storing them, she worked for a television station here in Sydney who's got a bureau in LA. And Smokey Robinson was doing an interview on television in Australia in this little booth, and I was racing to get to the airport. So while he was on air, we had to sneak into the room, and I had to pull these two long umbrellas out. They're in these cardboard boxes while Smokey's still talking, live to air via satellite link. And so they're really long boxes. We couldn't find a cab to get them in, and we ended up getting some hire car to take us out to the airport. And they're probably, I don't know, they're 15 feet long, if not longer.
Wow.
Wow. So I'm pushing, with me and my mate Kid, who I do the show with, we're pushing these trolleys with these umbrellas on them, for going from one terminal to the other, because they changed our flight from one airline to another. And this policeman stops me, and he said, "Where are you off to?" And I said, "Oh, we're going to Sydney." He said, "What's in the boxes?" And I said, "They're umbrellas." And he said to me, he said, "So you don't have umbrellas down under?" I said, "Oh, here's a question for you. Are you married?" And he said, "Yes, I am." I said, "You'll understand." And he said, "Okay, on your way." I mean, of all the things you have to bring back are two bloody umbrellas. But anyway, they look good.
Yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
So, Tim, how can people, especially those outside of Australia, find you on the web?
Instagram's my favourite choice. My Facebook page is a bit rubbish, and I just don't have time to do that. But my personal Facebook page, I'm easy to find. You can just come and say hi. But Instagram under Modernista is the best way. I'll get on my mailing list. We haven't been to the US for a while. We've been wanting to come out, but last couple of years we've been going to London for the Festival of Architecture doing the show. But we've been meaning to come out for ages. I've got a bunch of people who keep sort of emailing me and saying, "Can you come out and do the show?" We'll try and do early next year if we come out, but we can always make a special trip. And to be honest, it's politically, it's not the most appealing place in the world.
Really?
In America at the moment, so it's a bit of a shame.
Is it because of our progressive liberal attitudes?
Yeah, I don't know whether you read the news, but I suppose we love America, and I just, you're the best people in the world, and you've got the friendliest. It's the greatest place to visit, and it's saddened us so much in terms of our international friendship, and so that it just changes everything for us in terms of not feeling welcome. And it's, as someone who's I've got a journalist visa that went into America, and full well that you feel like they're going to stop you and check out your Twitter feed to see whether you've been saying anything wrong about the president. So it's not ideal. I know you guys think about it a lot in terms of how it makes you feel internally, but the message to the world is not a great one, and it's so sad, and hopefully it will be over sooner than later. But, it just permeates everything. It's just madness. And it upsets us all on a daily basis. And I know how it feels for you guys, but it's a universal thing that it's like a grief. It's like, it looks like a girlfriend's gone and slept with someone really ugly.
Didn't Donald Trump's first phone call, wasn't it to your prime minister?
Yeah, and he shat on him from a height.
He hung up on him.
We've been there hand in hand. We've gone to all the wars with you when no one else wanted to go to the wars. All that shit, man. It's awful. Anyway,
you were involved in our space program. It's all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I should tell you, we don't like the modernist travel ban either, but we're doing what we can to get the modernist travel ban lifted. So.
Don't joke about that. Oh, no.
So we have, as you know, a huge community of modernists in North Carolina, and if you ever want to come fly into Raleigh, we'll put on the show here.
Yeah, Yeah. You know what? I was speaking to someone a couple of years ago about it, and of course did nothing. I think I had a baby or something. I think that got in the way.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's good to reconnect, and, you know, we'll come out and we'll bring the guitar and we'll bring a bunch of stories, and I promise to be far more amusing than I've been on this.
No. Thanks for listening.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for being on the show, for getting up early today, and for all you're doing to preserve and promote modernism in Australia.
Good to chat, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for listening. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Sarah Sonk, the angel from Modernist Houses. Man, my Australian accent's horrible. 919-601-7339. Okay, take us out, Tom.
Visit usmodernist.org for more information about today's guest. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. US Modernist Radio is a production of North Carolina Modernist Houses, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. Olivia Newton-John, if you're listening to the show today, I do honestly love you. It says here. George and Frank and I'll be back in 2 weeks with another edition of US Modernist Radio.
Oh, come on. Who doesn't love Olivia Newton-John?
No worries, mate.
Let's get physical. Let's get physical.